Okay, hello and welcome everyone. In this video, I'm going to do practice exam walkthrough. So let's see. It's going to start off with some multiple choice questions, then I'm going to do some short answer questions and kind of walk through the logic. So question number 1, suppose you want to show that the minimum wage has a really large impact on employment. It'll help your argument if you can show in the market for unskilled labor. If we want to show a really large impact from the minimum wage, what this means is we are going to get a change in price. If you get a change in price, you cannot get a shift. You can only get a change in quantity. To get a really large effect on employment, this is the total number employed, what we'd be looking for is a really large change in quantity demanded of labor. We get a larger change in quantity demanded for a given price change if demand is elastic. So that's why the answer is elastic. What we're looking for is we're thinking, okay, we went from the equilibrium to the minimum wage. This gave us a change in price, namely the change in the price of labor. And then to get a really large change in the number of employed, we want a big change between the original equilibrium quantity and the new quantity of people with jobs. Notice like this Q is the quantity employed. Now there's a difference here because this is the quantity of labor demanded. This is the number of jobs available. What's the quantity supplied? It's something out here. This is the number of people willing to work. It'd be like, I didn't draw it, but it'd be like out here. And the difference between the quantity supplied at this price and the quantity demanded, this distance just out here would be unemployment. That's not what we're interested in. We're interested in a large change in employment, the number of people actually working. So this demand is elastic. Okay, the quality of internet streaming television and movies, as well as that of console and smartphone-based gaming, is expected to rise. We should think of this as increasing the opportunity cost of working, increasing the value of leisure. So we should expect a decrease in the labor supply. Notice, like I stopped reading the question because as soon as I got this information, I wanted to add this to what my analysis is going to be. We're going to get a decrease in labor supply that'll tend towards an increase in wage, a decrease in quantity. Okay, so now I'm going to finish the question on the assumption that many fast food workers are teenagers. Which of the following outcomes are possible consequences? Well, we're looking for something where wage rises and quantity of those working decreases because we have a decrease in labor supply. Item 1, the wage of fast food workers rise. Good. Wage of fast food workers falls. No. Number of fast food workers rises. No. Number of fast food workers falls. Yeah. So it's got to be 1 and 4. Okay. Which of the following is true of at least some monopolies? The market price will be higher than would result in the competitive market. Some consumers will not be served by the monopolist, but would have been served by the competitive market. A product or service will be produced that would not exist if the market was perfectly competitive. It's actually all the above. The first one, the market price will be higher and then would result in the competitive market. Yeah, that's exactly where the profits are coming from. The monopoly is going to produce where marginal revenue equals marginal cost, produce that quantity. We go up to the demand curve to find the associated price, and it's going to be something higher. There's going to be markup. There's going to be a difference between price and marginal cost, and so that's part of where the profits for the monopolists are coming from. They're restricting the quantity, raising the price, which is what happens by the law of demand. Now, that's associated with part B. Some consumers will not be served by the monopolist that would have been served by the competitive market. That's exactly the problem. By reducing the quantity, there's fewer consumers who are served by the monopolist who would have counterfactually been served by the competitive market. That's where the deadweight loss comes from. And then a product or service will be produced that would not exist if the market was perfectly competitive. That's probably true too, because you have a situation where now there's an incentive to be able to recoup the large fixed costs associated with innovation and so on and so forth. You can think of other types of monopolies here beyond like utility. Think of like patents and copyright protection. Like the only reason why you'd ever produce something that some like entertainment or something like this is if you're the one that's going to be able to recoup the benefits of your investment. Okay, which of the following implications of core principles of economics is essentially the same as the rational rule for buyers? So this isn't a great question for the present semester, but following the Stevenson and Wolfer's text, the rational rule for buyers just says keep buying whenever marginal benefit is bigger than marginal cost. Keep hiring. So the rational rule for employers says keep hiring where marginal benefit is bigger than marginal cost. The rational rule for sellers, keep selling where price is bigger than marginal cost. And then the key, remember, firms are buyers of labor. So keep buying where marginal benefit is bigger than marginal cost is the same thing of like keep buying labor when marginal benefit is bigger than marginal cost. So it's the rational rule for employers. Which will definitely cause an increase in the consumer surplus earned by the buyers of lattes. So it's going to be when a tariff is removed from imported coffee. So definitely if a tariff is removed, now we'd expect the price is going to fall. The price of imports is going to fall. The price of domestic prices actually is going to fall. If we're importing, this is a situation where the world price is lower than the domestic price. So, so if we're thinking about some tariff removed from imported coffee, that's going to affect the price of an important input. So now we're expecting the price of coffee is going to fall, the price of lattes will fall, and so that'll increase consumer surplus. Suppose the price of mochas instead of lattes rises. Well, buyers of lattes are going to price of mochas rises, so people would buy more. Lattes. What's wrong with this one? So the price of mochas produced instead of lattes rises. So people substitute away from mochas by buying lattes. That'll lead to increase in demand. It could raise the price, right? So if the price rises faster than the quantity rises. So this is why we'd say this wouldn't definitely cause an increase in consumer surplus. Consumer income falls. No, it's going to be bad. So wages of coffee shop baristas rise and price of pastries commonly consumed with lattes falls. Okay, wages rise. That's going to lead to an increase in price, decrease in consumer surplus. Prices of pastries commonly consumed with lattes falls. This will lead to an increase in demand. But that would give us the same kind of problem as with B, where possibly so increase in demand for lattes as a complement of pastries could compete up the price of lattes. Okay, so it's going to be a tariff is removed from imported coffee because that's the one that'll unambiguously increase consumer surplus. Yeah, B and D could potentially increase consumer surplus, but wouldn't definitely cause an increase in consumer surplus. Suppose the equilibrium price for scooter rides is $1. If the law decreased the maximum price for scooter rides to 50 cents, what happens to consumer surplus? Would necessarily increase? Not necessarily. Would necessarily decrease? Not necessarily. Might increase or decrease. Why? Well, what's going to happen? Here we have maximum legal price has fallen. So this is going to be a price ceiling. So here's a price ceiling that tells us the equilibrium quantity is going to be right here. Now what's happened is before the price ceiling was implemented, the price was $1. This is 50 cents. Price was $1. Consumer surplus is the area under the curve above the price. So consumer surplus initially was A and B. Then after the price ceiling is implemented, B and this unlabeled area become deadweight loss, and consumer surplus is going to be A and C because this is going to be the new price at 50 cents. Here's the new quantity. So consumer surplus could increase or decrease. It could decrease if the area AB was bigger than the area AC, but it could increase if the area AC is bigger than AB. Like this is a really kind of large rectangle relative to what this triangle would have been. You could try a number of different combinations of the graph to kind of make that picture fit and kind of have room for it, but this is the general logic of what's going on there. Suppose there's two potential workers I can hire in my coffee shop, Owen and A. Lodi. There's two goods that can be produced, pastries and lattes. It takes Owen 10 minutes to make a pastry, 2 minutes to make a latte. It takes A. Lodi 12 minutes to make a pastry, 3 minutes to make a latte. Assuming both workers receive the same hourly wage, both products for the same price, and there's enough demand I can sell anything my coffee shop makes, which of the following is correct? So what we want to do here is we want to find opportunity costs and we want to find comparative advantage. So if Owen is taking 10 minutes to make a pastry, this means that in the time that when Owen makes one pastry, Owen gives up the ability to make 5 lattes. When A. Lodi makes one pastry, A. Lodi gives up the ability to make 4 lattes. So A. Lodi has a lower opportunity cost of making pastries, and so should definitely, A. Lodi sorry, I was looking at what I bolded here. Yes, we should assign A. Lodi to making pastries because A. Lodi has the lower opportunity cost of making pastries, and Owen has the lower opportunity cost of making lattes. So we should assign Owen 2 lattes. The other way to do this is you could say, all right, I've given you productivities. Let's change these to outputs. So suppose we have 120 minutes. Why did I choose 120 minutes? Because that's something that's divisible by each of these times, 10, 2, 12, and 3, right? So 120 is divisible by 10, by 3, by 12, and by 4. So I just arbitrarily picked 100. Not arbitrarily, I cleverly picked 120. In 120 minutes, Owen can make 60 lattes or 12 pastries. A. Lodi can make 40 lattes or 10 pastries. So in the time that, Owen can make 5 lattes or 1 pastry. A. Lodi can make 4 lattes or 1 pastry. So that's just dividing 60 by 12 and 40 by 10 to get these numbers right here. I just want to get a 1 to n comparison, and that's exactly the same thing as we kind of did up here. So a couple different ways you can see this. A. Lodi has the lower opportunity cost of making pastries. therefore the comparative advantage. And then by extension, Owen has the lower opportunity cost of producing lattes, and then comparative advantage in lattes. So you can have the absolute advantage in both goods. You could have the absolute advantage in one or the other good. You could here, Owen has an absolute advantage in both, because we get 60 lattes versus Elodie's 40, and we get 12 pastries versus Elodie's 10. So Owen has an absolute advantage in both goods. You can only have a comparative advantage in one good. Price elasticity of demand measures the magnitude of the response in quantity demanded to a change in price. That's just the definition. So that's the definition of price elasticity of demand. When the price of gas is $3 a gallon, I purchase 11 gallons a day. When it's $2.50, I purchase 11 gallons a day. Let's look at my price elasticity of demand. It's the percentage change in quantity divided by percentage change in price. My percentage change in quantity, it's 0, because it's 11 minus 11 is no change. And then percentage change in price, who cares? Because we know the numerator is already 0. So my demand is going to be perfectly inelastic. How do we draw a perfectly inelastic demand curve? A vertical demand curve. If the price elasticity of demand for a good is 0.5, and then a 5% increase in price results in, okay, so elasticity is 0.5, percentage change in quantity divided by percentage change in price tells us 0.5 is equal to percentage change in quantity divided by 5, or let's see, 2.5 divided by 5 gives us elasticity of 0.5. So sorry for mixing decimals with fractions, but that gives us the elasticity of 0.5, or you could solve algebraically. So 2.5% decrease in quantity demanded. Oh, I didn't sign this. Of course, it's got to be a sign, because price elasticity of demand, actually, this should be in absolute values. So I should have absolute values here. But of course, it's going to be 2.5% decrease in quantity demanded. Provision of a public good generates a positive externality. Use of a common resource generates a negative externality. So the provision of a public good, this is something that's non-rival and non-excludable. Common resource is rival but non-excludable. So there's a positive externality when one person pays for the public good. It's available for others. It's non-excludable, so they're able to benefit from it. And the common resource, one person's use of the common resource is rival, so it decreases how much is available for others, so it generates a negative externality. To say a price ceiling is binding is to say the price ceiling results in a shortage. Yeah, so a binding price ceiling I've drawn here. It's a binding price ceiling must be below the equilibrium. It means it's not allowing the price to adjust upward. So here's the quantity supplied, here's the quantity demanded. Quantity demanded is bigger than quantity supplied. That's a shortage. Step below the equilibrium price, indeed, and causes quantity demanded to exceed quantity supplied. That's exactly what we mean by shortage. So all the above are correct. A profit maximizing competitive firm will hire an additional worker when the additional worker makes a positive contribution to total profit, right? Think about the value created by the worker, it's going to be their marginal product, the additional output they're producing, times the value of the marginal product, and that's going to be bigger than the cost, but bigger than their wage. Well, if revenues are bigger than cost, profit's increasing. Nurses who work in hospitals are often required to work over weekends. Nurses in doctor's office only Monday through Friday. Hospital nurses work on weekends, are paid more than those in doctor's offices, even if they have the same skills and education. This is a compensating differential, right? So this is where you are paid a premium for incurring the unpleasant job description. And then there's the penalty, maybe for the doctor's offices during the week, getting the pleasant there's a wage penalty for the unpleasant characteristics of the job and a wage premium for the pleasant characteristics. Sizable economic profits can persist over time under monopoly if the monopolist, it's got to be protected by barriers to entry. That's the only one, because otherwise you're going to have firms coming in trying to capture this economic profits. Produces where the output average total cost is at a maximum. No, you don't want to maximize average total cost. Operates as a price taker rather than price maker. No, that's competitive market. Earns revenues that exceed variable costs. Well, that's going to be a situation where there's economic profits. However, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to persist over time unless you have barriers to entry. Movie theater can increase its profits through price discrimination by charging a higher price to adults, a lower price to children, if it can prevent children from buying the lower price ticket and selling them to adults. This is preventing resale. Has some degree of monopoly power, pricing power that's necessary to be able to do price discrimination in the first place, and can distinguish between the two groups of customers. Yes, hopefully you've recognized these as our 3 characteristics that are necessary for price discrimination. Which of the following events could cause a labor demand curve for workers in the butter industry to shift to the right? So for the butter industry to shift to the right, we're looking for an increase in labor demand. So the price of margarine, a substitute good, decreased. This is going to decrease the demand for butter because people are going to buy margarine. Lower demand for butter means lower demand for workers producing butter, so that's the wrong direction. Price of bread, a complement, increased. So this is going to so price of bread, a complement good, increase. So you're going to buy less. I don't know what this direction, what this arrow is doing here. We want cause and shift to the right. Price of bread, a complement, increased. So we're gonna. This is not correct, because if the price of bread rises and bread's a complement, you're going to buy less bread. You're also going to buy less butter, and so this will decrease our labor demand for butter workers. So this is not correct. The price of Netflix and online streaming content subscription falls. This is going to increase the opportunity cost of working, so it's going to decrease the labor supply. That's this right here. Income of customers increase, and butter is a normal good, so this will increase the demand for butter, therefore increase the demand for butter producing labor. So the answer here should be F, IV only. Let me double check. So now I'm in the middle of my video, but let me double check my logic here, because I was ardently convinced it was 2. So price of bread, a complement, shifts labor demand for workers to the right. Price of a complement rises. You buy less of that good and you buy less of the associated good, butter. So buying less of the good means a decrease in labor demand. Yeah, this is wrong. I don't know why. I don't know what I was doing. So, and I remember from now as I'm thinking back, I remember how I scored this. And so this was, when this was an exam, that was indeed the answer. So no problems then, problem now, because I didn't fix it. So, okay. How will this firm optimally produce if the market price is 5? Show, explain how you know. Oh, so this is short answer. Explain, consider a competitive firm facing the following cost structure. How will they produce if the market price is 5? So we go to see where marginal cost is 5. We're going to produce where our marginal cost is equal to our market price. That happens in 2 places. It happens here if I produce an output of 2. It happens here if I produce an output of 4. So if the marginal cost associated with 2 is 5, which equals the price, check the average variable cost. So if I'm producing 2 units, average variable cost is 7.5. That's bigger than the price of 5, so we'd shut down, we'd produce 0. What about over here? If I produce 4, I wouldn't produce 5 because now marginal cost rises to 7. But if I produce 4, marginal cost is 3. Price is bigger than marginal cost, that's okay. What about average variable cost? Oh, it's 5.5. So if I produce a quantity of 4, my marginal cost is 3. That's less than price. Good. However, the average variable cost is bigger than the price. So we'd optimally produce 0 if the market price is 5. What are the profits there? Well, the profits when you're producing 0 are just going to be your loss of the fixed cost. Fixed cost is 10, so my profits are going to be minus 10. Question 2. When I was a child growing up in Wisconsin, mother would drive the family across town to a store that would sell bakery items, the day-old bakery, at a reduced price to anyone willing to arrive early in the morning. So what's the discount? The reduced price on the bread. What's the hurdle? We have to get up early, load the kids up, and drive across town to buy old bread. Who won't jump over the hurdle? Those with a higher willingness to pay to buy bread. And who will jump over the hurdle? Those with really, really low willingness to pay and really low opportunity cost of time, which was us. And so we spent a lot of time going to the day-old bakery to save money on bread. So, okay. So I like following local news, true. Here I saw the story about Oklahoma's newest cash crop, medical marijuana prices falling. So this is interesting because there's a lot of economic interest around this market, a lot of sort of policy questions. So analyst number 1 might say, oh, marijuana prices are falling. This is because of an increase in the supply. That's this picture, increase in supply, rightward shift to supply. Analyst 2 might say, this is because of decrease in demand for marijuana, although it doesn't seem to match what we seem to be seeing. Oh, I drew this as an increase. God. Okay, so this should be a leftward shift of demand. So, but either way, this picture shows. Suppose this is my new one. This is my old one. Oh, I mean, this is my old one. This is my new one. This shows what would happen to the price. Anyway, so in the context of the supply and demand model, what further evidence could we gather about the market that would immediately provide insight into which analyst is correct? Well, we need to determine the price effect. And here I just took this picture and I just wrote the same thing down here. So if demand, this here I'm drawing this as demand increase, but we're trying to show prices falling. So this needs to be a demand decrease. We think of this as like a downward arrow, and think of this as a downward arrow, and think of this as a downward quantity, because we're going from this red one to this blue one. And I totally would I'll fix this for the version I uploaded, but I'm too far into this video to fix this, to do the video again. So this actually should be a decrease in demand. So we want to go from the red to the blue. So this will be a decrease in quantity, decrease in price, because here's the price, here's the price. Okay, need to examine the price effect. That's really all we need here to provide insight, because we have need to analyze the price. Need to examine the price. No, wait. So we know the price is falling. Okay, so we know the price is falling. What's different between these pictures? The quantity effect, not the price effect. I don't know what I was thinking here. So here, if we have an increase in the supply, what ends up happening, we get an increase in quantity. Look what's happened to quantity. If we have a decrease in demand, let's take this to be the old demand. This is the new demand. This is going to be a decrease in quantity. So no, we're not looking at the price effect. We need to examine quantity. Affect quantity. So I wonder if I can fix this here. So this should be, if I get my text box. Oh, now I got a million text boxes. Need to examine quantity. If demand, I'll just put this here. Need to examine quantity. That doesn't work. That's horrible. All right, need to examine quantity, not price. All right, so here we have, if demand decreases, quantity falls, price falls. Think red dashed line to blue solid. Okay. Now I can't probably move this, can I? All right. Well. All right. So that kind of explains what that ought to do. Goodness. Okay. So let's suppose, for the sake of argument, the demand for marijuana actually has increased. That's why I screwed it. Okay. So let's briefly explain two demand stories that would explain the change in demand. So suppose demand has increased. Nevertheless, price has fallen. Firstly, though, what could lead to an increase in demand? A change in the number of buyers. So legalization might bring more people into the market. Change in consumer taste, maybe there's cultural shifts towards a more positive view. Either of these, so basically we're giving shifter and then explanation. Shifter and explanation, so 2 points for the increase, or for the shifter, 2 points for the explanation. That's what this was. Okay, so let's suppose, for the sake of argument, demand has increased, though we know price has fallen. So what must happen? Well, we're told the price fell, but demand increasing tends towards price increasing. So supply must have shifted more. So here I have a small increase in demand, but I must have had a much greater shift in supply so as to drive the price down, because the increase in demand tends towards raising the price up from here to here, right? Increase in demand tends towards consumers competing with each other, competing the price up, but we were told the price had fallen. So we need to explain this price decrease. That can only happen, think about like big small method. This must only happen if supply has increased so much that it swamps out that price increase. Right now we've flooded the market. This abundance pushes the price down. So we have a lower price, we have an increase in quantity. Okay, so that's correct now. All right, fatbraintoys.com. So fatbraintoys.com. I don't know if these are clickable. I don't know. So selling educational toys and competing in the same market. They see advertising as a way to expand their market share. I've got a connection to Fat Brain Toys, if I hadn't said that already. Good company. So here, suppose they're moving simultaneously. They can advertise or not advertise. We want to find the Nash Equilibrium. So what I'm going to do is solve Nash Equilibrium by best responses. I'm going to say, suppose Hearthsong has chosen to advertise. What does Fat Brain want to do? Well, if they advertise, they get 300. This is the payoffs to the row player. Is 300, 180, 410, and 280 are the payoffs to Fat Brain. 370, 200, 430, and 280 are the payoffs to Hearthsong. If Hearthsong chooses to advertise, Fat Brain can get 300 if they advertise, or 150, so they ought to advertise. So I'll underline 300. If Hearthsong does not advertise, Fat Brain can get 410 if they advertise, but only 280 if they don't advertise. So they're going to advertise. I'll underline 410. What if Fat Brain decides to advertise? Now Hearthsong chooses between advertising and getting 370 or not advertising and getting 200. So I've underlined 370. If Fat Brain does not advertise, Hearthsong chooses by advertising between getting 430 and by not advertising getting 280. So they are going to advertise. Notice I've got underlines across this whole row, which tells us Fat Brain has a dominant strategy to advertise, right? Advertising is always the better response. And Hearthsong has underlines across this column, which tells us advertising is always the best response. It dominates no advertising. So for each player, they have a dominant strategy. Remember, dominant strategy doesn't say anything about the other player. It just says something about the relative merits of that strategy relative to your other strategy. So Fat Brain's decision to advertise dominates their own decision not to advertise. Hearthsong's decision to advertise dominates their own decision not to advertise. Both have a dominant strategy, and it happens to pick out, well, if you have not all Nash Equilibrium involve dominant strategies, but if somebody has a dominant strategy, that must be part of any Nash Equilibrium. So the Nash Equilibrium is here. We see that because that is where we have two underlines in the cell. Underlines mean you're best responding. Since both are best responding, nobody wants to switch, wants to be the only one to switch. So that reinforces this Nash Equilibrium, or this says Nash Equilibrium. Nash Equilibrium is advertise, advertise. Notice it's advertise, advertise, not 300, 370. Those are the Nash Equilibrium payoffs. Both are best responding when they choose advertising regardless of the rival. What would be the Nash Equilibrium if one moved first and the other moved second, having observed? Well, advertising is always the best response. It's a dominant strategy, which means we don't care what the other person does. If you have a dominant strategy, it doesn't matter if you observe the rival or not. You always want to use that strategy. So think about from Hearthsong's decision. It doesn't matter if Fat Brain's choosing advertising, or if Fat Brain chooses advertising, Hearthsong observes that, they're going to choose advertising. If Fat Brain chooses no advertising and Hearthsong observes it, they're also going to choose advertising. So they always choose advertising because that's a dominant strategy, whether or not they observe the rival's choice. Would this be a prisoner's dilemma? No, it's not a prisoner's dilemma. It's not a coordination game. It's neither. Prisoner's dilemma requires both have a dominant strategy. Good, we've got that. But it also requires both are mutually better off when not using their dominant strategy. Well, suppose they don't use their dominant strategy, then we're here. Look at the sum of the joint payoffs. That's adding 280 and 280. That's smaller than adding 300 and 370, right? So the social surplus, no, it's not greater when they use their non-dominant strategy. So this is not a prisoner's dilemma. Okay, describe the opportunity costs associated with each of the following. You enter a contest and win 2 free contests to a concert in your hometown and you decide to go. Well, the opportunity cost would be the foregone ability to do something else. So for instance, stay at school, study, or whatever. You wake up in the morning feeling sick and decide not to attend Econ 101. What's the opportunity cost? The foregone opportunity to learn. You drive to Target to buy a new espresso machine you've been waiting for some time. The price of the espresso machine is $200. What's the opportunity cost? The foregone use of the $200 towards something else. Right, so maybe the opportunity cost is relatively high. Okay, and wonderful. I've got my reminder to do something. So, all right. Anyway, that's the end here. Hope you enjoyed. All right. Good luck.